The Senate has just voted to end the US involvement in the war in Yemen. Now, this is a war that the United States has joined forces with Saudi Arabia on, and the Senate finds this deeply problematic. Not everyone in the Senate, but the majority of senators. In fact, they voted resoundingly on Thursday, today, to withdraw American military assistance for Saudi Arabia's war in Yemen. The 56-41 vote was a rare move by the Senate to limit presidential war powers and send a potent message of official disapproval for the nearly 4-year conflict that has killed tens of thousands of civilians, including children, and brought famine to Yemen. Now, this is a great move by the Senate, but it doesn't mean much. If anything, this is symbolic. But when you look at the House of Representatives and what they did this week in terms of the Farm Bill, it's clear that there won't be an actual law that would basically end US involvement. So on Wednesday, the House actually narrowly blocked a vote on whether to cut off US support for the Saudi-led coalition by invoking the War Powers Act. The House blocked the vote by a razor-thin margin of 206 to 203. Now, with that said though, the Pentagon, the Defense Department still plans on being very much involved in this war. And this is a story that was broken by our very own Ken Klippenstein at TYT Investigates. What he found is pretty depressing, so let's get to that. So according to the reporting, on November 30th of this year, the US Air Force released a notice of its intent to award a contract for a product maintenance and support plan. Now that package would provide various forms of support, including software and maintenance, to the Saudi Royal Air Force at 6 different air bases in the regime through December 31st, 2025.
So we are going to continue apparently aiding and abetting the Saudi government and in all the horrific things that they have done in Yemen. And we now have more concrete sense of how long that lasts because of TYT Investigates reporting here. It will go through 2025. And I want to point out that the heroes that led this fight and almost won in Congress to stop that funding for the war in Yemen and to stop the support of the Saudis were Ro Khanna in the House and Bernie Sanders in the Senate. Once again, the most progressive members of Congress are the ones that either take action and get things done, as they did with Stop Bezos Act, or come incredibly close to actually getting the Republicans to vote with them and do more progressive legislation when the so-called moderates have gotten almost nothing done. So let's be honest about who's practical and pragmatic. But unfortunately, they missed out by 3 votes in the House because of 5 corporate conservative Democrats that voted with the Republicans. So understand who's on whose side here.
And I also want to help people visualize just how bad the situation in Yemen is. Now, there's been great photojournalism from the New York Times on this story, and I want to commend them for that. But in terms of broadcast journalism, I haven't really seen much coverage on this at all, and there hasn't been anything to help people visualize what's going on. So we're about to show you some images of Yemeni children and just the toll that this war in Yemen is taking on them. These are innocent civilians, obviously, but the images are difficult to look at, so I want to give you a warning before we go to them. But this is what Donald Trump supports. This is what Donald Trump is complicit in. It is horrendous. The famine that's taking place, the tens of thousands of children who have already lost their lives as a result of this war.
So it's heartbreaking.
Yeah.
So let me explain the numbers. So 14 million people are on the precipice of dying from hunger in Yemen. It's unbelievable that in the year 2018, that millions of people might die from hunger. 5 million of them are kids. It has already begun. The deaths have begun. The famine has been around for a while. 85,000 kids have already starved to death in Yemen. So they didn't have to. The Saudis blocked a port that brings in food and medicine. That's why they're starving. And so they control the country, and the Saudis don't, but the Saudis control the port. so the country's starving. And so we should be incredibly upset about what happened to Jamal Khashoggi. The Saudi government chopped him up, beheaded him, etc. But we should be even more upset about 85,000 kids who starved to death because of the barbaric regime of Saudi Arabia and our aid of them. And again, this TYT story proves we, undeterred by this massacre that's happening in Yemen, the United States military is still working with the Saudis all the way through 2025. And by the way, who benefits? In this case, it's a company called Tactical Communications Group. So a defense contractor is still making money while those kids starve to death. Remember why we launched bombs on Syria a little while back? It was last year. And Brian Williams called the bomb spectacular and beautiful, and the media celebrated that Donald Trump was being tough, and finally he's the president, and they said all these outrageous things. They did it because Assad had launched chemical weapons. Now, that's an issue that's in dispute, but the chemical weapons are horrible no matter what. And even if you believe that Assad did it, which is the most likely scenario, and some kids died and it was horrific, and we showed you those pictures as well. That was a small number of kids. It's not to excuse it at all. It's just to say, if you were that concerned that you thought we should have launched bombs against Syria because of those number of kids, well, then you should be absolutely outraged at the 85,000 kids that have starved to death because of Saudi Arabia. But instead of being outraged and bombing Saudi Arabia, as we did with Syria, we helped them bomb the kids. They bombed funerals, weddings. They bombed a school bus full of school children. And then they turn around the Saudis, because they never admit to anything, and said, oh, yeah, no, those are terrorists in training. Well, and 5 Democrats joined the horrific, horrible Republicans in continuing to support this war in Yemen.
Well, those campaign contributions from those defense contractors must be very alluring. Like, that must be worth it for them, which is really sad to say and to think about. But even though the Khashoggi murder is not connected to the war in Yemen, it is kind of interesting to see how the murder of a journalist, which was of course ordered by Mohammed bin Salman, led to people actually paying attention to what's happening in Yemen. Because prior to that murder, it seemed as though no one was paying attention. It seemed as though our lawmakers weren't paying attention, the media wasn't really paying attention, and now all of a sudden people are a little more aware of what's happening and how the US is involved in this.
Yeah, this is the fact that we came this close, and when the Democrats take the House, maybe we can finish this. You have to understand, it's a stunning reversal of how Washington normally works. The defense contractors are on the Saudi side, and it appears so is Netanyahu and the right-wing government of Israel. That is a coalition that never loses in America. So, and they're on the precipice of losing. It's unprecedented. And I think, and they're talking about using the War Powers Act to take that power back to the legislative branch where it belongs, which is declaring war, being involved in war, etc. Also unprecedented in my lifetime. I think that these progressives that are running uncorrupted with no corporate PAC money, I don't know if I'm overstating it, but I really think it's making a huge difference. It's driving the Democratic Party to not necessarily the left, but a position that the American people believe in, that morality dictates, et cetera, rather than the money. And it's even embarrassing some Republicans enough to go in that direction. So as depressing as it is that they lost the vote by just 3 because 5 Democrats flipped over, and Paul Ryan insisted in putting it into a farm bill. So he's like, I'm being clever in how I protect my Saudi friends and my defense contractor friends. Paul Ryan, I got bad news for you. It ain't that clever. We all figured it out, okay? And despite the fact that famine and that war continues, and apparently if they have it their way, will continue through 2025, I gotta say, I think we're on the edge of actually winning on this issue. Ro Khanna is gonna join us in our special tonight, 8 to 11 p.m., tyt.com/live. He's gonna talk about this vote. and who he's mad at and who he thinks is most responsible for it. He's the one that pushed for this in the first place. That's a wonderful, uncorrupted progressive already inside the House. That's a Justice Democrat, first one to ever join. Man, then you got TYT Investigates breaking these stories. Guys, look, I don't want to overstate it, but I actually think you guys are making a huge difference. Whether it's the support you give to politicians that are actually on our side, whether it's the pressure that you put on Congress members, it's your funding of the reporting team at TYT, all of it coming together. I've never seen a situation where progressives are actually close to winning in my lifetime in America. And here we are, we're at the edge here. And I think that in the next Congress, it might be a totally different situation. And I mean, knock on wood, you'd never want to underestimate the defense contractors. But next year, we might actually win on this and get out of this horrific war where we have helped to cause immeasurable deaths and suffering. And this is, when you see those pictures and you know that America helped to make that starvation, famine, and death happen, by the way, also record outbreak of cholera, the worst that the world has ever seen in Yemen at the same time because of that blockade. So if we're a shining city on a hill at all, if we have any morality left at all, we will exit that war at the beginning of next year.
The TYT Plus app is now available on iOS and Android. Download to get more TYT content at tyt.com/app.